Hello, everybody. I'm so pleased to say this is the second episode of the podcast series for Again by myself and my fantastic guests that's titled Vina Talks Andy Life. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be welcoming Matt Pellowe, who's a friend of mine, actually. It's been a while now. I think we know each other 4-5 years, Matt?
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll come to it, something like that. We actually got to know each other from and through our glorious industry, insurance, reinsurance, broking. Let's invite everybody. Let's embed the whole ecosystem. Essentially, we have many things in common. I did already cover insurance, and obviously, the background there, but we're both ADHD. And that is going to be a very interesting second episode. It was a strategic sort of decision not to make it the first episode, obviously, because it would have never sort of, so it would probably cover 1 to 100. But it's great to actually show to people already early on what two ADHDers can do on a podcast sort of environment. So off to you, Mark. I hope I will get the chance again to sort of speak, which is why I gave this kind of like prologue. Can we hear a little bit more about you in terms of introduction about yourself, but also in terms of your insurance industry journey so far?
Good morning, Vina, and thank you for inviting me to come on and have this chat. I'll try and keep it on topic as much as I can, but as I've learned, I tend to go off on different tangents, so do bring me back. We met quite a few years ago in the insurance industry. I've been in the insurance industry for 29 years. The market is a fluid place, and I have some frustrations with the pace of change within the industry, but maybe that has to now do with my internal motor and my ADHD. I've worked for insurers, I've worked with brokers, I've worked sort of on the periphery of Lloyd's over those time, and it's been a fantastic journey, to be honest. I've learned a lot, and having worked on the underwriting side and had a pen, now in the broking side, I do like working with clients. I like the connections with people. I enjoy that. But I think, ultimately, I just like the challenge. I like the idea of someone saying, we have a problem, can you solve it? And it's just a natural fit for what I now know is a head that processes information differently.
Excellent. I mean, I loved your points about problem solving, definitely, and the challenge. But really what absolutely resonates with me still in the era of AI and everybody sort of, being scared whether they will be losing the jobs the few years to come and all this kind of big palaver. I personally find that insurance is one of the few sectors. It might sound like an oxymoron because obviously we're still in a community of people, of humans, although, okay, given the atrocities of the last week, sorry, I could not mention that. It makes you wonder how much of a human species we are. But let's assume for a second that we are still very much, and we have the built-in empathy and everything. We're still a persons and people sort of industry, and that really connects with me. Now, obviously, the irony there is that although we are a people's industry, we all pretty much look the same. And on the shop floor, especially, trading floor, we like to say sometimes, although we all know we're not doing trading or indeed rocket science, as one of my earlier sort of bosses would say, which I find so fascinating. It's kind of connected with me. We still recruit people who look like us and who behave like us. There's times when I would catch myself, looking at people working past the office thinking, I wonder what you do, what you really enjoy doing, because we don't tend to ask each other in an interview, what do you enjoy doing? What do you like? I know you're an actor, for instance, but is that what you do in your spare time? Start number crunching for fun? So how do you think that connects? I mean, do you see the same for starters? Do you see that?
I do. I mean, I'm blessed at the moment for, my current employer, Clements, is a very inclusive, multicultural organisation. It's a fun place to work. But I mean, coming back to your point, I think it just takes time to discover what you like and, how you apply what you like to do and what you enjoy doing into your sort of career and work environment. It's going to take a little bit of time because, your first job is unlikely to be your last job as well. I think, if you look at the insurance industry, it's still got I wouldn't say a stigma. I'm trying to think of the right word. I mean, there's a perception around insurance. You talk to the person and you know, whether you're on the personal side or you're on the general side or, you know, EV side, but actually just, you know, in starting that, if you think of the so many different roles, jobs, what you could do within the insurance industry. And, you know, if you're someone who likes to work with people, you work with people, both internal and external. If you want to work within, you know, numbers, you could be an actuary. So I think, you know, wherever your interest and your passion might lie in terms of helping people, you know, there are industry sectors where you can help people. You can work with charities. If you want to work overseas, if you want to work in oil and gas. So I think there's a lot within the insurance industry that you can offer, but I'm not sure, and, you know, not in my experience was the question ever asked in terms of, you know, if I look back for my career, hey, what do you want to do? Is the right thing. I think we gravitate based upon what we know, but we don't know enough.
Obviously, neurodivergent are people like us who've got a particular neurodevelopmental condition. This is how I sort of define it myself, and I'm sure it's not 100% accurate if I speak to a specialist. But okay, it's actually getting to know what triggers you, and I'm going down now the path of adjustments without really sort of wishing to particularly. But my initial sort of point was in terms of interest as a human being, interest in terms of I'm interested in financial literacy, for instance, or I'm interested in the behavioral traits of humans, climate change, innovation. Allowing people, therefore, to sort of bring, as we always say, you know, I suppose it's the last sort of 5 years, the trend, bring the full selves to work and connect with each other on the premise that we're more than just what our job or our role defines us as to be. You know, I'm not just I don't know, client manager or a director, or God forbid, you know, of the said sort of department. You're a human with interests and with families or not, or, you know, pets, whatever it might be. This is basically where I was trying to get. And
yeah, I'm on a fascinating journey because I'm still unpicking my past. It's very difficult sometimes just to sit here at the age of 48, knowing and discovering what I've discovered, and then to try and put me as I am now and what I know about myself back in time to when I worked for a Lloyd's agency or when I worked for a composite insurer. It's quite difficult because I can't correlate with that person. Obviously, you know, through a lifetime, people will, they get older, they get more experience, they learn things, they have life experiences. But I can't pick myself up and think, what would that person have done? You do, in part, that's part of the ADHD late diagnosis journey, because you start to look back and think, what if, and the grieving. But I think I'm becoming more of my authentic self now. Now I know about myself. But I can't look back and say what could have been, you know, the decisions that I've made. And there has been some spectacularly bad ones, you know, because that's the condition that I've lived with unknowingly. But I think the insurance industry has served me well, and I think I've served the insurance industry well and successful. But at the same point, I do have this, I wonder what if I brought the me now 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you know, that's without the utter carnage that it's created in my personal life. You know, you look at both sides of it, but I think, you know, that's the important conversation now, which is what I'm finding, and I'm sort of, you know, working out in my head is like, okay, I've had this really good career. I've thrived despite having a condition that has created many challenges for me. But I also think, you know, you're at this point where I've spent a life effectively trying to fit in, so I've sort of overcorrected despite not knowing what my challenges are and the reason for it. So I think that then just sort of fits into, you know, how we cope, how we mask, you know, what is masking, what is coping. That's a conversation. And I'm still learning. And it's like every single day, even in this conversation, you know, you're asking the questions and my head is going off as I take the conversation in a different direction. I apologize. But it's
perfect.
It's one of those things whereby I think with my experience now, and again, you know, we're here to sort of support that conversation and the narrative about neurodiversity within the workplace. I've been relative, or for me, I've been successful with the insurance industry. I've enjoyed it, but there's also recognition, which I haven't really spoken about, is the challenges. You know, I can't go back and say a company because I didn't know that I was ADHD. So from my standpoint, there is a what if, and there is a, you know, there's a group process that I'll go through.
Yeah.
But at the same point is I can look back with a little bit of pride and say, actually, despite being undiagnosed and despite the challenges that I'm now come to terms with, I can still carve out a successful career within the insurance industry. And I love the insurance industry for all of the frustrations that I have with it. I love the insurance industry. I think it's fascinating. It's interesting. It's a people industry. I mean, you pointed out so that shop floor, you could walk around the city bumping into people. You know, I started off when, you know, most of the deals were done downstairs in a pub somewhere off the back of a fag packet. You know,
come on.
Thankfully, we're far more sophisticated now in those days.
Only slightly.
I think the insurance industry has just grown. It's a global industry. You know, you've talked about AI, but actually you're still a connective industry. You know, I work with people all over the world and different cultures, different backgrounds.
Absolutely.
Why should it be any different for those of us that are sitting within the neurodiversity umbrella? You know,
absolutely. And what you say, you know, about sort of, you know, it's a global, because obviously we're speaking about, you know, the correlation of risks. We're speaking of conglomerates and huge global companies. And obviously, you know, all the risks are interconnected. You have to have this kind of appreciation. Cultural sort of underpinnings or geographies should not deter us from doing a good job. And the good job is the pinpointing, the mapping out of this sort of risk infrastructure, the understanding of how things, again, I'll use the same word, are correlated. I mean, you know, the fact that so many economists is always speaking about this kind of interdependencies does help. But I loved, you always raise so rich sort of content. And can I just say, anybody asking a question, this is my very philosophical Greek theory, anybody asking a question, it's not really for the question itself per se. For me, it's for the stimulation of the thinking process in the brain. This is how I've always sort of, you know, treated any question. And so apologies for those failed interviews, clearly.
No, not so.
The expectation might have been slightly different to my philosophical approach to life.
I said before we started, try to keep you on topic. It's going to be nigh on impossible, but I'll do my best.
Well, I think if there's one failing, the two of us can only be me. But you spoke about the grieving process and the what ifs. Again, as a person, I'm having this theory. I will try to sort of, you know, and impact and sort of influence my future and my present. I do appreciate that other sort of components that sort of influence what happens at a point in time, and I'm okay with that. You know, you like quite often you'll find me with a smirk on my face, and people are like, "Are you laughing at me? Are you just, you know?" No, I'm not. I'm actually processing what's happening around me now, and I'm finding it quite refreshingly unanticipated, but you know, that can only make us wiser, I suppose. Masking. Now, masking, I see many people around me, and probably that was what I was implying earlier, you know, that people walk past you and you're thinking, who are you really, truly? And I bet many people were basically, you know, putting on that mask of not just neurodivergence, the mask of, you know, representing a underprivileged sort of socioeconomic background, because they know their own sort of family story, or the different cultural sort of, you know, or a bias, or whatever it might be. So this masking exists. What I was always feeling was the sense of acceptance, but gosh, aren't you weird? Like, you're animated and we enjoy you and you're high performing, but you're so not us. And you know what? I was always saying that, and I still do. Does it bother me? No. There's times that frustrates me in the sense that I want to sort of turn around and kind of go, your behavior is so in my face that I can see it, but I'm not quite sure whether I want to bother and sort of come back and say, hold on, why? Why do you think that's actually out of the ordinary? Why? And what is the ordinary? And who defines your ordinary? And if somebody defines it, then surely it's not your ordinary. You've just been imposed the appreciation that if it's not within this kind of ranking or this bandwidth, then we're going to be laughing at it, or we're going to be feeling awkward towards.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying there, I mean, I find that quite triggering, because me, that comes down to judgment. Which, funny enough, is probably one of my strongest boundaries. I think, you know, human age, I mean, you've already said yourself, everyone masks, and everyone masks based upon the environment they're in. And I think I'm trying to correlate that in my head in terms of, you know, and again, it's a personal experience whereby I know that I've masked for a long time. But, is masking, working within a professional environment, working with different cultures, I think we're all going to mask because there's an expectation around behavior. But there obviously is someone else's expectation versus I have a condition and there's certain things that I do. I'm here with an orange dog toy, which is actually my fidget toy.
Perfect.
I think 3 or 4 months ago, I would have been, that'd be out of the way. That's me masking. I don't want anyone to see it. I have it on time. I have it in all my meetings now. It's fine with me. But I think if it's unhealthy and it's a detriment to your mental and emotional well-being, that's unhealthy masking. I think if you then look at the industry, there is, and this could be within just any commercial environment, there is an expectation around behaviours and how you are supposed to behave. And you have to fit in a box with a set of parameters and guidelines that you're not given.
Yeah.
What sits outside the bounds of acceptability. I can probably quite confidently say that some people maybe find this a little bit strange, but it's not unacceptable because this helps my anxiety. It helps me focus. The whole thing. And again, the greatest example is if I think back 30 years ago, when you meet someone and when you talk to someone, you give them the firm handshake, you look at them, you make sure you maintain eye contact. What I've realized is I've got ADHD and I'm so get overloaded and overwhelmed with senses. I can't look at someone, so I have to look away, so I just hear their voice. And if I could just hear their voice, I can focus in and I remain focused. That is a good example whereby if you take the corporate box and how you're supposed to engage with people, if you want the best out of me and you want me to remain absolutely focused, I will look away a lot. And it's not because I'm not interested. It's not because, we're now pushing into the bounds of self-advocacy and being able to know yourself and what you do. But again, I think there's important things whereby, I don't want to fit in a box. If someone wants me to sit in a box, I'm not interested. That's your box. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that I can't thrive and I can't deliver in terms of what I do in both my professional and personal life. Probably 5-6 minutes ago, you mentioned accommodations and adjustments. I'm going through that process at the moment. But it's important for me to be able to understand myself and say, okay, I have this, but this is important to me, and these are the reasons why. So it's up to us to have that, understanding of ourselves in terms of, I understand you have expectations. I'll meet those expectations. I understand that I have to deliver for you in terms of my role, my responsibility, and there are expectations around that. How I get there is not going to be maybe the normal way of doing things. But I can explain to you about why you do it. I just think, feel, and experience the world differently. You can thrive, albeit with challenges silently in the background. You can thrive within our industry with a neurodiverse condition. And, we can talk about the umbrella of the so many different neurodiverse conditions. But I think, I feel like responsibility to add to that narrative, because the media will pick up one individual, and yet again, ADHD doesn't exist. It's a trend. It's a made up. No, it isn't. You don't walk in my shoes. You've got no idea. You've got no idea. So I like the people who, I've got a really good friend of mine, bless her. She's very curious about my ADHD. So she's coming on the journey with me. She's always asking questions, but it's coming from a place of curiosity and care and love. Even though she looks at me baffled sometimes to say, I have no idea what you're talking about, but she wants to try and understand it, even though she can't. So, but again, we want that in our working lives. We want that in our personal lives. We don't want to read another article about ADHD. It's a fad, it's a trend, because those people who are stuck in a system waiting for 5 or 6 years because they can't afford private, they're reading that as well. And how is that helping their mental and emotional well-being when they're struggling with no support anyway?
Absolutely.
So from my standpoint, it's, having a platform like this to talk to you and to talk to others within the community, particularly those that are a little bit younger. They're looking at careers within insurance particularly. I say, yeah, go for it. There's great opportunities in there. And it's also making sure that, as an insurance industry and as an insurance community, we're educated and we understand. I can only talk about me and my ADHD and how it affects me. But the big issue is we can't then default to ADHD. Here's a guideline and a manual for ADHD, because you have ADHD, but you're going to present completely differently, and you'll talk about things that you struggle with, and I will be baffled by it because I don't struggle with it. I will talk about things that I struggle with, and you'll be baffled because you don't get it. We've got the same.
And here's my example, Matt.
Yeah.
Here's my example. When you said about the firm handshake and the sort of, typically people look people in the eye. So I've got, for my small stature, I've got a very firm handshake. Yeah. That's something that I've always had. Not to do with my Taekwondo black belt and one dan. Yeah. Let's not forget that, just in case anybody's up for messing about. But always a firm handshake and always looking people in the eye. However, there's times when I cannot recognize myself, in the sense that I won't be able to sort of look at the person. Speaking now, corporate life, it has happened a few times, and I just wanted to start sort of slapping myself, really, just to snap out of this. And I've now, given that I'm also a late bloomer, ADHD wise, so I recognize the traits only last year, and that's again me extremely thankful to Gain for. I was already with Gain, and it was through all this awareness and education that I got to sort of connect my own traits to what we were discussing.
Yeah.
And the entire sort of ecosystem of what this behaviorally means. So whereas in the past I used to say, yes, of course I'm like exuberant, of course I'm using my hands and all this, I'm Greek. And then I'm looking around, not any, and well, not many of the Greeks that I know are exactly, this kind of behaving. So clearly it wasn't sufficient. Clearly it wasn't really, what it was all about. So it has got a name, it has got a label. I'm happy for that label. It's even on the headlines of my LinkedIn profile. I'm very happy to sort of acknowledge who I am and why I behave this way. But back onto the sort of maintaining eye contact, when I feel judged, and that was particularly happening with my line managers, always male, when things would become too, I don't know, too direct, too raw, too unfiltered, and I was feeling an underpinning of sort of, being judged as much younger, female, Greek, non-English, I would be unable to sort of look at them in the eye. And that was the moment where, I think now I know that my neurodivergence was kicking in, and I was being very self-critical. I started sort of acknowledging that, perhaps I'm completely wrong. Perhaps, perhaps I shouldn't be here. Perhaps not imposter syndrome. I never sort of, taken to it, but it was more of a critic, as in, you don't fit in. Come on, love, you don't fit in. You're not. It would only, thankfully, it would only last for a short while, but every single time was so much suffering for me afterwards, because I would beat myself up as in, you're not this person. What's wrong with you? And you cannot sort of, influence the way that other people sort of, want to communicate certain things. It's okay. And I'm sure, because obviously of the very sort of unfiltered sort of way that I transact as well, they knew what I'm like, and they still know, and we still have good contact. But yeah, that was so interesting. And only now I know. So that's already a difference between you and I, given that we're both ADHD. We're not all the same. Like, not everybody's the same. That's the other. Complete different DNA chains. That's, the very sort of objective way I look at it. But one thing I wanted to sort of, highlight also, because we spoke about the difference and the acceptance. And, I was asking you whether we all sort of, do we really look the same? Do we really recruit the same people? What I find fascinating in the insurance industry also, and the square mile, is that we love quirk. Yeah, we love quirk. So we have this unwritten rule about no brown shoes. We love our pinstripe sort of suits. I was traveling yesterday and I was all in full jacket sort of suit, to the point that in the end I thought, you know what? I'm removing the jacket. Like, that's a little bit too much. Come on now, Vina, you're not in the city. But so we love quirk, but we love the quirk that's basically with the dress sense, with the signet ring, with of course the attitude, the rugby, the golf. But how come we don't sort of allow this quirk to sort of highlight, to reveal the attitudinal quirks in people? Or when it starts highlighting that, we don't call it dyslexia. We don't call it dyspraxia. What do you think? Is there a way we can actually, start sort of latching on this quirk that we do have inherently in the city and sort of try and sort of, call it names, neurodivergent names?
It's interesting. I think from my standpoint, but also I can empathize with the other side. And, when I say the other side, I'm talking about the workplace, the employer versus the employee. I think, and I can say from my own standpoint, there is a fear of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
But I also suspect, from the other side, it's difficult because, we're a global industry and there's different regulatory environments that people have to adhere to. But I think there's a definite lack of understanding and lack of education around it, I think, and then controversial potential, I'm about to say. I'm not comfortable with the term neurodiversity. We spoke the other day. It's such a broad church of conditions that sit within it. It can cause a lot of confusion. So we talk about neurodiversity, and even in that sense, we're segmenting. But again, ADHD, autism, there's so many different that sit within there. It becomes, if I put myself in the position of someone within an organization who wants to embrace neurodiversity, where do you start? It's a challenge. But I also think, from my standpoint, there's a fear of being judged, but there's also a fear of being misunderstood. So I think fear is a driver to people's behaviors about masking and coping. And I get that, and I understand that. And, I'm, as you know, I'm quite a confident extrovert guy, but it doesn't mean I don't have the crisis of confidence. Now, people will argue, yes, but we all suffer with that. And no, that's true. But my sensitivities are far more pronounced because I have ADHD. How do you then explain to an audience what ADHD is when they've heard ADHD from Vina and they go, well, that doesn't sound like Vina? No, it isn't, but there is a big spectrum and there's a big range, and we're like a graphic equalizer where I'm up one day and down the other. And then all of a sudden, I think in that articulation, you can lose the person, you can lose the interest and the curiosity because it just doesn't make sense. So I think in terms of trying to, if you're confident, talk about it, try to explain it, but you need the other side to be open and to have a willingness to hear you. I just, from my standpoint, I need to be understood. I need to be heard. I need to know that the other person is not just dismissing what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm okay because I would just shout a little bit louder if you're not listening to me. But then that comes with the experience that I've got and the fact that I've got a few grey hairs and nearly 50 years of age. If you're younger and you don't have that experience, you're going to not necessarily be comfortable leaning into that fear and saying, I have a voice, I need to explain things. So I think, if I summarize that, is what you want is the other side to be open, to be curious, and to have a willingness to listen. I don't think we have to solve everything on day one, but people need to know that they can go and have a conversation without fear of judgment and know that they're going to be heard and understood. But that's just I think that's a human thing, but we need to bring that into the neurodiverse conversation when you're talking about employers and employees. I feel quite blessed and privileged to be working for a multicultural, inclusive organization where, for me, it was a conversation. Hey, I've got a label. This is what it means. But actually, I don't know what it means because I've got to unpick 48 years of masking, coping mechanisms, overcorrecting, and actually find out who I am. I get to self-managed, and I know that I'm in a very, very privileged position to be able to do that. But I also recognize that that's not the case for a lot of people. So again, if I start talking about what I'm doing at the moment and what's working, hopefully it just helps other people in terms of, okay, I could try that and have that conversation. But even, with the confidence that I've got and the position I have in the organization, it's still, I've got to tell them I've got ADHD. And it was like, right, how do I do this? Because you want that person that you're going to talk to hear you and not dismiss you.